I think it's true exponentially more. Sometimes the testimony of our faith is just saying, I believe, but I have questions, and it's okay. Yeah. And you see the sense in this book of like, he's looking for certainty, 100%. I think that's another recipe for just setting yourself up with a standard way too high. So I agree.
So I think a big factor in his sort of deconstructing his own faith was the experience that he had in the primary church that he pastored. He invested so many years of life. In fact, I think you make a good case that he actually burned out several times
he says
in the midst of that, which he openly admits.
Yeah.
But he was sort of summarily dismissed from that church as well. How would you describe the pain that he experienced and the mistreatment that he experienced in his role as the senior pastor of this mega church, and how that sort of shaped the trajectory of where he ended up?
So I highlight a few passages I want to read because I want to make sure that our viewers don't miss how harrowing some of this story is.
And I think we should, to be fair too.
Yeah.
You know, I suspect the church might have another side to this story.
Absolutely.
And so we don't want to minimize that, but we only have access to one side here.
Agreed. And there's he names a lot of people you and I know that are rock stars in the evangelical world. Yeah. I'm sure there's another side to this, fair enough, but we're just going to interact with it as he describes his own story publicly. He says things like, behind the scenes, I saw repeated examples of how churches claiming theological purity were subject to the same human failings and limitations as any other organization, including incidents of sexual misconduct ranging from inappropriate touching to extramarital and homosexual affairs. And when it happened in their own realm, they typically guarded their image and kept it quiet. And honestly, you and I have talked about that on this podcast. Spiritual abuse, when someone claims to be representing God, speaking for God, and then doesn't care about helping people who are hurting and the truth getting out, that's damaging. And he describes this spiritual abuse, although he doesn't use that term, just weighing on him over and over and over again. I hear that a lot from skeptics who have left their faith. That's one piece he brings in. Another one I'll read, he talks about hypocrisy. Let me track this one down. I mean, this is just his honesty here. He says, when all the people that represent the church in your life suddenly no longer represent the things you were so absolutely sure that they did, you are forced to question all your beliefs. That's the reality when the people failed him in that way. Another one, Scott.
I think actually his exceptions to faith, I think they're just a running list of those hypocrisies.
That's essentially what it is. And this one, I mean, I paused and I shared this with my wife. It was hard to take, but he describes going to another pastor, trying to reconcile. At this point, I believe in the story, he had stepped down, had been divorced, had made some mistakes, comes to a pastor and tries, from his perspective, to reconcile. And this pastor communicates to him that he is permanently broken.
That's heartbreaking.
That he's beyond being fixed. And I just thought, what on earth? How could you communicate such a lack of grace to somebody who's coming to you feeling broken, hadn't left the faith yet? And you just get the feeling he feels, again, he's telling his story, this hypocrisy, this hurt, this failure just beat down. And then it comes to fruition. I'll just read one more because I don't want our viewers to miss this. But he describes, he says, I slipped away from my Christian family, and they, for the most part, responded by acting as if I no longer existed. Your value to other Christians diminishes when you leave. I mean, that's
quite the contrast to the parable of the prodigal son.
Yes, there's a definite contrast in the lack of grace that's there. That's fair. Last one I'll just read to make this point. He says, for me, the straw that broke the camel's back was being unable to find a place for spiritual healing when I was most broken. So he left the church that you talked about, the mega church, 1985 to 1995 in Houston, that got up to 15,000 members plus. And then he said he finally had his own pastor after leaving that church for the first time. And then at 69 years old, that pastor shot and killed himself. I mean, just the brokenness and the hurt in his experience is really the story behind this, that if anything, it should make the church say, are we agents of grace? Are we kindness? We need to make some shifts.
Well, I think it turned out that the church turned out not to be. Even though the interesting irony in this is that one of the really positive things that Tim did for this church was to make it a haven for people who were broken.